First of all, I want to definitely give thanks to the Almighty for several reasons. First of all, it was about, okay, this is 1990, this is 2014. It was about 20 years ago, actually about 22 years ago, when I first sat in one of those seats that you are sitting in right now. And I was greeted by the then dean of the Howard Law School, and he challenged us as first-year law students to be engaged and to go out into the community and to connect with the members of our community and find out what the District of Columbia was all about. That was none other than the late Honorable Judge Henry Ramsey. And Dean Ramsey at that time really emphasized particularly public service and how the opportunities to get involved with public service here in D.C. was unlike any other jurisdiction in this country. And so I took his challenge and got involved with the community as a 1L student and really sought to find out what he was talking about. And I had an opportunity before that time throughout the remainder of my undergraduate career, because I transferred here as a student from the Air Force Academy to finish up my degree in engineering at Howard. And I got a chance to work for the members of the Congressional Black Caucus and really see a little bit about what he was talking about. But it wasn't until I got to the law school and I got involved in some of the internships that the law school exposed us to at the Federal Communications Commission and other places to really understand that our government has an awesome responsibility. And I think that the Attorney General, particularly under the new legislation that we have with the Attorney General being an independent and, in fact, elected officer, is an awesome role to have. And so I thought that it was important that where voting rights legislation, at least the blueprints of the advocacy for that legislation originated here at Howard University with Charles Hamilton Houston, with the Justice Thurgood Marshall and C. Clyde Ferguson, and a number of other people who I'm sure are Howard Law School. Let me see who are the Howard Law School students in here. Let's give our Howard Law School students HU. Right, just want to make sure you were there. That it was important that when we had this conversation about the first ever elected Attorney General, that the home of the blueprint for voting rights was involved in that conversation. Not just involved by being a passive observer, but by being an active member of the conversation. So that's what we're having today, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. We're going to have a conversation with the members of the candidate pool who are running to become the next Attorney General. We hope that one of the people who you'll have a chance to dialogue with will be the next Attorney General. And it was an honor that not only we as the D.C. Muslim Caucus were thinking about these issues, not only members of the Howard University alumni community were thinking about these opportunities, but also the National Lawyers Guild and Stand Up for D.C. and a number of our organizations, including the D.C. Latino Caucus and the D.C. Asian American Pacific Islanders Caucus. They were all thinking about this idea. And so in the concept of cohesiveness, the concept of working together, we decided to join forces because we thought that, here in the District of Columbia, all too often organizations fall apart and they only focus on their disparate issues as opposed to focusing on their collective issues. And as a result of that, people who don't have the same common issues or common interests that we have become more powerful because they picked us off one by one. And in fact, gentrification, as we see happening in our streets every day, is an example of that. So we thought it was important to come together in solidarity and to stand side by side to ask common issues or common questions to the people who are going to be vying for our vote. So the D.C. Muslim Caucus is going to be, over the next 48 to 72 hours, making a decision about who's, which of those candidates are we going to support. Columbia's Muslim population, which some estimate runs from either 5% to 20%, depending upon whose numbers you're looking at, is going to make a decision about those candidates that we believe deserves our vote. And we're going to go out and campaign for them, hold fundraisers for them, and make sure that they are elected. So without any further ado, I want to introduce my colleague, who was really one of the people who, when we reached out to talk about having this conversation, was already down the road planning a conversation. And again, out of the spirit of solidarity, she agreed to join forces with us. And today we stand side by side with the National Lawyers Guild and having this historic conversation here at the home of the civil rights legislation and voting rights legislation. And so without any further ado, I want to bring up Attorney Ann Wilcox, one of the representatives from the National Lawyers Guild, to give you greetings. Let's go.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a real pleasure to work with the Muslim Caucus and the other groups that are co-sponsoring. I just also wanted to give a brief word of greetings to all of you. We want to thank again the National Lawyers Guild, which is the progressive legal arm in our legal community, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. Empower DC, which is also a leading progressive voice. Rock DC, the Restaurant Opportunities Center. We have, of course, the 3 unified caucuses that we mentioned. We also want to give a special welcome to the Charles Hamilton Houston Law School Preparatory Institute, the representative of that is here. It's from Georgetown University, and we're very glad that you made it as well today. Just briefly, the DCNLG was founded in 1937 as an association of progressive lawyers and jurists who believed they had a major role to play in the reconstruction of legal values to emphasize human rights over property rights. So we've always had a very progressive outlook. It was an integrated bar at a very early time and has been mostly made up of labor lawyers, civil rights attorneys, and attorneys who defend dissidents in various struggles, such as anti-war or against surveillance and in areas like that. You would see us we're a familiar sight wearing our green hats at various demonstrations, looking out for the rights of demonstrators. We've been in Ferguson in the last few months. We also work on issues such as the Cuba blockade, self-determination for Puerto Rico, death penalty, and other related issues of civil liberties. We hope you'll join with us. We've always had some contacts here at Howard, and we hope to build those contacts in the future. And thank you all again for coming. Now, without further ado, I do want to introduce our moderator, Johnny Barnes, who's the self-described people's lawyer, we all know very well. He's spent more than a quarter century in various congressional offices, including service as the Chief of Staff for 3 members of Congress. He's taught law and college courses at area schools and was one of the founders of the street law program at Georgetown Law Center, which is a very respected program. After retiring after a decade as executive director of the ACLU of the National Capital Area, Johnny expanded his public interest practice, and now he's the lead counsel on lawsuits involving the closing of public schools, a lawsuit that challenged the barring of young men from housing projects, which is very important, and numerous efforts related to DC statehood and self-determination. So he's certainly proved his mettle as the people's lawyer, and we're very pleased to have him today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. You said that just as I wrote it. I appreciate that. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, as Talib said. Make us feel welcome here. We're about 30 minutes behind, but I guarantee you we're going to catch up. Is Ashley Futrell here? Okay. So we'll keep moving. Yeah, isn't that Ashley? That's what I thought. So we're going to allow Ashley to bring remarks. She's the president of the Student Bar Association for Howard University Law School. And she's bringing remarks on behalf of the students and on behalf of Dean Danielle Holly Walker, newly installed Dean.
Absolutely. As Ashley comes on up, I just want to again let you all know how grateful we are to the Howard Law School for opening up its doors. And when we sent the message out to the dean letting her know that we wanted to have this historic conversation. Immediately she said, yes, we have to have it here. And not only did that, she said, look, you got to get the students involved. And so we're going to have Ashley, or do you have another designate to serve on the panel?
We can find someone.
If you don't, make sure that you're that designate. But let us again give a warm round of applause to Ashley, who's speaking on behalf of the Dean of the Howard Law School.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Futrell, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Student Bar Association President for Howard University School of Law. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here to Howard University School of Law, where every day we lead the fight for social justice. We don't just say that, but we actually lead that fight. The Student Bar Association here at Howard University School of Law exists as the student governing body for our institution, which means that every student is a member of the Student Bar Association. And as a third-year law student, just a few more months until graduation, I can say that the experience here has been like no other. The fact that we are having a DC Attorney General debate right here at Howard University School of Law for the first election for an Attorney General of DC is nothing short of inspiring. And it's the kind of thing and the reason why I came to Howard University School of Law. Charles Hamilton Houston may have said it best when he said that a lawyer is either a parasite on society or a social engineer. That quote, I heard it my first year, actually my first day of law school. And when I think about an event such as today, where we're talking to candidates who are running for Attorney General of the District of Columbia, I think to myself how important that quote really is. It's interesting because 43 other states elect their Attorney General, but this is the first year that the District of Columbia will hold its first election for Attorney General on November 4th, 2014. My charge to the candidates is this. As Howard University School of Law students, we are watching and learning from you. We are watching the decisions that you make, and we are listening to you. Many of us here as students are just craving mentors. In fact, the Student Bar Association this year created the first Howard University School of Law Alumni Mentoring Program, where we are working with our alums and pairing them with our first-year law students to form genuine relationships. So today, I just want to thank all of the candidates for coming out today to this institution and for sharing with us your platforms and why you are excited to run for Attorney General. And before I sit down, I have to thank the group of Howard Law students who are here today. If we can just give them a round of applause. Many of them are first-year law students, and I remember first year, on a Saturday like this, when it's so gorgeous outside, I was only in one place, and that's the library. And all of you are here today, and I just think that that's incredible. And so personally, I just want to thank you for coming out to volunteer and being part of this today. So thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to having an informative discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Clark, take a seat and serve on the panel.
Thank you. Just one minute.
Okay. Ms. Futrell is going places. She played to her constituency very well. That's a good thing to do, and hopefully the candidates picked up on that. We have an excellent panel that will ask questions in the first round. I'm going to ask the panel to limit the time of their questions to 30 seconds because we want to make sure that you all get a chance to ask questions in the second round. To my left is Jeff Light. He's a lawyer. He's engaged in 50 cases with the Attorney General's office, and we hope he wins them all. Jeff also submitted an amicus brief in our school closings case, and we appreciate that. To his left is Parisa Nuruzzi, who is the Executive Director of Empower DC. Empower DC is a grassroots organization, and they've done an excellent job, probably one of the most premier organizations in Washington, D.C. in organizing. And they have also been very helpful in the school closings lawsuit, the Ivy City lawsuit, and other important matters to the people of Washington, D.C. To Parisa's left is Saida Kazim, and we'll get to know her as time goes by. I'm sure she's has a rich background. And then we expect Ashley Futrell to join us on the panel to ask questions as the student representative, and she'll have good pointed questions as well. We are fortunate to have 5 good candidates for the Attorney General of the District of Columbia in this historic election. Candidates that are all exceptionally well qualified. If you check out their backgrounds, any one of them would serve us well as the next Attorney General. As Ashley pointed out, 43 states now elect Attorney General and Guam. And so we are catching up with the rest of America, most of America, in terms of electing an Attorney General. I've got 5 major cases with the Attorney General's office, and so I very much look forward to an elected Attorney General, someone who's not responsive to the politicians and the interest groups, someone who's responsive to the people. Inscribed above the Supreme Court is the phrase equal justice under law, and they got it wrong. It ought to say equal law under justice. Justice is the higher authority. This Attorney General's office has put law above justice, has put interest groups above the people, and I've been very disappointed, to be frank, but I won't get personal about some of the things, some of the tactics in which they've engaged. Law and justice don't always meet. But we do have 2 Attorney General candidates with us. They're smarter than the others because they're here. Take note of that. I haven't made up my mind yet, but these 2 are helping me to make up my mind. You don't ignore the people. Latifah Williams is here, and I've known Latifah for many years. She's been an activist, past president of Gertrude Stein, a brilliant young woman, would certainly serve us well if she's elected. We also have Carl Racine. Carl earned his stripes with the D.C. Public Defender's Office, the premier public defender's office in the country. He's now a partner with Venable, a law firm. He's a managing partner and has managed many lawyers. So we're delighted, and we're going to get started. As I said, we're about 30 minutes behind, but I guarantee you we're going to catch up. And we will ask the candidates to limit their responses to 1 minute each from the questions. So if you all will take your seats at the table, and I'll start by just asking you as you come. The council recently passed legislation that reorganizes the way legal representation will work in the District of Columbia. Each of you, we'll start with Latifah, take a minute just to comment on the council's new law.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you everybody for coming out on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. So I disagree with the council's decision to reorganize the Office of Attorney General. So one of the things that is in the new law that was created, which created this position, was that many of the attorneys that are currently within the Office of Attorney General are going to work for the individual agencies. So one of the things that I want to do is, so they're going to work for the individual agencies, and then those attorneys will report to the agency general counsel, and then the general counsels will report to someone appointed by the mayor. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to have meetings and establish a good working relationship with all of the agency attorney generals to ensure that we have consistency of law coming out of the Office of Attorney General. So that's one of the main reasons, or the main reason why I disagree with the decision to move these attorneys away from the Office of Attorney General, because ultimately it's the responsibility of the Office of Attorney General to determine the law and the consistency of those laws. So it's important that these agencies are consistent with the Attorney General's office and that don't go out on their own.
Thank you, Latifa. Mr. Racine, same question.
Thank you very much. Let me say at the outset how thrilled I am to be here at the Capstone Howard University School of Law. As a DC resident, you know, I just loved growing up near here and just seeing the wisdom and effort of all the students. I can tell you, for the bar, studying for the bar, every day I studied at Howard Law School because it was inspiring to go through the hallways and look at those black and white photos of the warriors who graduated from the school, and times of fear of whether I'm going to pass the bar or not, or fatigue. It was always a source of motivation that I could do more than I thought I could. So it's a pleasure to be here. Second, it's a great pleasure to be here with Ms. Williams, who I have tremendous respect for from this campaign. Frankly, we rarely disagree on issues. And so I'll follow on your question just by saying exactly what Ms. Williams was saying. Let me just draw a picture for you, though. Can I court some indulgence if I could have a little bit more time? Thanks a lot. So the OAG...
We'll give you 10 more seconds.
Okay. So the OAG was organized previously in a way where all of the lawyers reported to the Office of Attorney General. That allowed for consistency in application of the law. What the council just did was it broke that. It moved Office of Attorney General lawyers away from the Office of Attorney General into the agencies. That's going to cause a lot of confusion, and it's a potential recipe for disaster. We can get to that later.
Thank you, Mr. Racine. Sayeeda Kazim is a lawyer who is past counsel to the Embassy of Pakistan and a board member of the DC Muslim Caucus. And we're going to, since we didn't appropriately introduce her at the outset, we're going to give her the first question, 30 seconds. So let me just say, though, before we go, everybody has a right to run, but you ought to have a reason to run. And today's debate, we hope, will bring out the reasons these two individuals are running. Go ahead, Gina.
Well, my first question is, as U.S. Attorney General, you'll have the authority to determine the direction of your legal staff. What types of things do you plan to implement to bring in a more diverse legal staff?
Sure.
Carl, you can start. You got 1 minute.
Okay. Very briefly, I think it's one of the most important questions that's out there, and that is how will the office be composed? Who's going to be a lawyer in that office? What's going to be those lawyers' backgrounds? Are they familiar with the community in which they must serve? And so, yes, when I come into the Office of Attorney General, if I'm so fortunate to be elected, I will make sure that in regards to the people I bring into the office, that they have certain characteristics that are clear. Number one is a commitment to the District of Columbia. Number two, to the extent possible, that they are residents of the District of Columbia. Number three, talent without regard to gender, race, ethnicity. As a managing partner at the Venable Law Firm, I was the first African-American managing partner of a top 100 law firm. In short, I broke barriers because of folks behind me and people whose shoulders that I stood on. I made it a great point of priority to always advance the interest of other lawyers, non-traditional women and other ethnic groups, so that people could see that they too could lead and manage and practice at the highest levels, and I'll do that at the Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Mr. Racine. Ms. Williams.
Well, I think diversity in all forms are paramount. So that's one of the things that I would focus on in recruiting, to ensure that we have attorneys within the Office of Attorney General that truly understand the perspectives of DC residents. So that also means diversity, not in terms of race, gender, but also in terms of socioeconomic background. I think it's absolutely important to have people who work for the office who understand the perspectives and have come from some of the communities that district residents have come from. So that also means placing an additional premium at hiring from the district's law schools, particularly such as Howard, such as UDC, which would also have a lot of district residents there. So I think that's important too. And then making sure the office is a place where all attorneys can grow. So having and establishing good mentoring relationships with more senior attorneys in the Office of Attorney General, with more junior attorneys, to ensure that when we hire the attorneys, they're put in the best positions to succeed.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Ruzzi, your question. 30 seconds.
Thank you both for being here. The issue of development and who benefits from development is paramount in the city right now. And what we find is that regular residents, like I was just working with Berry Farm residents, going up against developers, the Housing Authority, Holland and Knight, through the zoning commission process, and it's really not a level playing field. It's really difficult for regular people to have a voice in that process. So I wanted to know, how familiar are you with city planning? Are you familiar with the comp plan, the zoning commission? What would you do to strengthen the public's role and ability to influence development when they have to come up against moneyed developers and land use attorneys?
Before you all answer, I just want to recognize young man in the back of the room. Stand up, Judge. Alex Williams, Howard graduate, Howard professor, and but more importantly, a recently retired federal judge. He sat on the bench out there in Maryland, and just an outstanding federal judge. He should aspire to those mountains to which Judge Alexander has reached. Thank you, Judge, for being here.
Could you please change the name tag of Mr.
Oh yeah, switch. Yeah. So
Your tag?
you don't want
to the left.
to give your vote to
It's to the left over here.
Is this, oh, okay.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Ms. Williams, you remember the question?
I think it was about influencing the role of the people to influence city development.
Yeah, public land use.
Right.
Yeah. You got 1 minute.
Okay. That I will sit there and listen to the tenants, understand their perspective, and don't have someone who will actually advocate on behalf of their needs. So that's what I want to do as Attorney General. I think the Attorney General is supposed to represent the interest of the people. So that's what I take the public interest to mean. And if there's a situation where there's a conflict, then what I would do is I would appoint a special counsel to represent, say, any agency needs, so that I will be able to represent the needs of our residents.
Thank you. Mr. Racine, 1 minute.
Sure. There is no issue as I go around the city listening and really engaging people in conversations as to how they're feeling about this city. There's no issue on which there is more anxiety, real tension, significant fault lines than affordable housing. The statistics are clear. Washington, D.C. at $950,000 a year has the most expensive cost of living than any other city. More than New York City, more than San Francisco. And our very own citizens here, many of whom no longer work, no longer are able to live here, are concerned about their remaining family members. The folks who live here, in short, are anxious, appropriately so, as to their ability to continue to stay here. Here's my view on affordable housing. I think that it's clear that world investors, be it the Asian market as well as the Gulf market, views Washington, D.C. as the pearl that they want to have a stake in. It's our job as lawyers for the city, and my Office of Attorney General will do this, to negotiate the best deals on behalf of the people in the district. And I think that through the various processes, the people have been locked out of those meetings. We've not been at the table. I will take it as my charge, my obligation, hold me accountable to be at that table fighting for the best deal for the citizens of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Racine. Mr. Attorney Light, your question.
Good afternoon. Earlier this month, the DC Council's Committee on the Judiciary heard testimony here at Howard University about a variety of questionable police tactics, including jump outs, racial profiling, and stop and frisk. Could you identify one official DC police practice, widespread practice, or official policy that you believe is unconstitutional?
Mr. Singh.
Sure. Well, you remember years ago, the District of Columbia Police Department had a policy of all hands on deck enforcement, and they really imposed that policy on the neighborhood of Trinidad. And that's where they essentially put that entire neighborhood on lockdown, where people who lived there for years were not able to get into their own neighborhoods without serious identification. We all understand the need to police our city's streets and keep our citizens safe. However, in the United States of America and in Washington, D.C., there must be a balance. I think that overzealous law enforcement, like that which was practiced on Trinidad, is certainly unconstitutional. Arbitrary jump-out patrols that target young men of color is arbitrary, and I think also of dubious legal validity. And certainly any kind of targeting or racial profiling is also illegal. I guess I'm finished?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that what the red means?
That's what it means. That means stop. Before Ms. Williams answers, let me introduce Ed O'Brien is here. Stand up, Ed, let the people see you. He is the president of the board of the American Civil Liberties Union for the nation's capital. And that question, Jeff, opened up the floodgates of memory because the checkpoint in Trinidad, the ACLU,
Right.
we put a checkpoint on the police. And ultimately, the court did declare that activity unconstitutional. Ms. Williams.
Okay, well, first of all, I agree with what Carl just said, so I would definitely echo those sentiments. But also, another practice I think is unconstitutional. I know we alluded to the practice of the lawsuits of targeting young men who live in public housing projects and public housing complexes, and I think that's unconstitutional as well. Particularly, there's been a situation where young men have been told that they cannot visit certain complexes, though they have done nothing wrong and have no criminal history. I mean, I know one of the people it ended up happening to at the time was an elected official. So I absolutely think that it's unconstitutional to bar what it turns out were mostly lower income young black men who were just showing up, or for whatever reason it was very arbitrary, and they decided that they had the right to arrest these young men for traveling anywhere and basically impeding their right to travel within the city. No, I absolutely think that's unconstitutional. So I think that's the type of thing that's unconstitutional. And like I said, that's the type of thing that I want to fight against as Attorney General, and that I want to understand and I will understand and know what's going on in the community, so I can make sure that those things aren't occurring under my watch.
Those barring notices are really, really bad. It's going to be sort of a love fest for the ACLU. The ACLU has been involved in that as well. Go ahead, Ms. Luttrell, 30 seconds.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, we have several law students who are in attendance today, and I know that as I look around my classrooms, I see various people who are interested in public service and maybe even one day being an attorney general. So my question for you both is this. Can you tell me about qualifications for attorney general and whether the number of cases you've tried or have not, or even whether you've been a prosecutor before, determines whether you're qualified to be an attorney general?
Ms. Williams, good question, Ms. Luttrell.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't think being a prosecutor is not a qualification, and most of the cases the Attorney General has are civil, so, that's not, I don't think that has any bearing on if one should be Attorney General. That being said, I have represented clients in 71 cases in court. Those were all in Maryland. I'm barred in Maryland and DC, so those were all in Maryland. But in addition to that, that's when I represented working class people as a litigation associate. Since then, I've spent most of my career doing public policy, law, as well as community advocacy. So what I have done is I've spent a couple of years as political and legislative director to Metro's largest union. I also served as counsel to the Prince George's County, Maryland State Senate delegation, and I worked with a nonprofit for a couple of years on nonprofit tax law issues. But for me, my connection to the people is what I've done in addition to that in the community. So I've been a local community activist for the last 10 years, president of the Gertrude Stein Democratic Club, former president, which is the city's largest LGBT political organization. I was an officer in the Young Dems, and now with the Ward 5 Democrats, DC Federation of Democratic Women, and a board member of the Wanda Austin Foundation, which provides housing to homeless LGBTQ youth. So I think it's absolutely important to have an attorney general who understands the community and has been in the community at a grassroots level, working on behalf of the community for years.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Racine.
Sure. You know, I think that there is no set metric nor set qualifications that are required for the job. I think what you have to do as voters is really take a look at the entirety of the candidates and make a judgment as to whether the Attorney General will be effective. I would focus on the following characteristics, just highlight a few. I focus, number one, on something Johnny mentioned, actually. I call it empathy, and your concept of empathy really is justice. I think it's really important that your Attorney General will be someone who has demonstrated through their work and through their civic duties that they have great empathy. As a former public defender, certainly as an individual who's involved in numerous not-for-profits that focus on the lives of kids, education, and leadership, I hope I've demonstrated empathy. I think it's really important for your Attorney General to be widely viewed and have the stature and reputation of being an exceptional lawyer in the law. And after all, that's the hardcore, nuts and bolts part of the job. I would respectfully suggest that I've got that from my years of experience, not only in the Public Defender Service, but also the White House. Lastly, it is important when you're electing the first Attorney General in the District of Columbia, a new office, a new culture needs to be established, that that lawyer has experience in leading and managing lawyers. And I've done that.
Thank you, Mr. Racine. We're going to do one more round of questions from the panelists, and then we'll turn to you all. And by so doing, we should be back on schedule. We can take this past 4 o'clock. The formal program will end at 4. And anybody who wants to stay and keep going, we will. But since we promised you 4 o'clock, we'll formally end at 4. Ms. Neruzzi, you have the second question.
Thank you. In the lawsuit that was brought by Empower DC and Attorney Barnes on behalf of Ivy City residents, we were fighting the placement of a polluting tour bus lot in the heart of the community. But one of the primary issues was the city's failure to carry out and uphold the statutes governing advisory neighborhood commissions and their role in community decision making. So I wanted to know, as an Attorney General, what would you do to engage with and strengthen ANCs? And what aspects of ANC governance are you particularly concerned about watchdogging and ensuring compliance with?
Mr. Racine.
Okay. I know that Latifah speaks so eloquently on the Ivy City issue, and so I was going to wait for her to really hit that point. Here's what I would say to you. Number one, look, fundamental to the Attorney General's position is the enforcement of laws, and all the laws that the people have enacted, the people determined are important, should be enforced. Either they should be enforced or they should be removed from the books. So number one, we're going to enforce all of the laws. In regards to the ANC, they play a significant and a very important role in our democracy here in the District of Columbia. And so, of course, their views on the issues have to be presumed to be that of the people. And they are entitled to great weight. How that weight is accorded in the law is something that's a harder concept, but you can't simply ignore the viewpoints of the ANC. I will note, however, and just as I want you to hold me accountable, I too will hold the ANCs accountable. There are a couple of ANCs out there who are functioning as mini dictators of their regions. And what they do is say no all the time. And they say no all the time, not for good reason. And I think it's important and incumbent upon the Attorney General to not only elevate the role of the ANCs, but also make clear what it is they should be doing and what it is they should not be doing.
Thank you, Mr. Racine. Ms. Williams.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Carl, for that acknowledgement. And I will say that I have spoken about the Ivy City situation quite a bit at these forums, because I think that's that's a prime example of where the will of the people was just ignored. I mean, you have a situation where they're putting a bus barn in the community, and I think one of the reasons they chose it, and yes, I understand the proximity to Union Station, but also was because it's an underserved community and they thought that they could just put an environmental hazard in this community and get away with it. So I think it's absolutely important to have an Attorney General who's looking out for the best interest of the community, who will sit there, and first of all, when you have the community standing up and saying, as well as with people like Empower DC, saying, no, we don't want this in our community, it's imperative that you have an Attorney General that will listen and not advocate against the residents of the district, as has happened in that situation. Now, I also think that the ANCs do play an important voice generally. And when I'm having these forums in the community, the ANCs will be part of that process. And I'll probably have an additional forum just for ANCs. But one of the things, for me, community engagement is absolutely important and paramount. And as someone who came from the grassroots communities and will bring that grassroots advocacy to the Attorney General's office, yes, I plan to work with those elected officials, but I also plan to work with the everyday residents who aren't elected officials, but are just residents of the community, and particularly if there's a situation there in Ivy City, then yes, the average residents would have a voice. But one of the things I would do is I would represent the will of the people, and if there's some additional need to represent the district's interests, then that's when I appoint a special counsel, and I think that's the perfect situation to do it in.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. I won't get started on Ivy City, but I will say this, that they had 12 lawyers, wasted resources, 4 from Covington, Berlin, and 8 from the city. They lost the case, and then they appealed. And during the course of the appeal, they did the very things for which the citizens of Ivy City complained, giving citizen participation and notice, and following the environmental laws. So I won't get started on Ivy City. But we don't want an Attorney General who one, goes against the clear interests of the people, loses the case, appeals because they have the resources to do so, and then, go ahead, Attorney Kazim, you're up. I don't want to get started on Ivy City.
Okay, as Attorney General, you have the opportunity to issue opinions unless the court overturns them. What opinions, if any, do you plan to issue that will assist minorities in the DC community?
Ms. Williams.
Okay, so first of all, one of the things I want to do is, I'm gonna, from those forums, I'm gonna be able to gain an even better understanding of the needs of the residents. So some of the things I want to do are in consumer protection, as far as absolutely ensuring that our residents are protected in those areas. So, I would issue, well, first of all, one of the things I want to do is enforcement. So in addition to, the strict enforcement of current laws that aren't being enforced, I would look and see what's not being done and move forward in that area. In addition to that, I think it's absolutely important to focus on juvenile justice and to look at some of the things that are being done or not being done. One of the things I want to do is work with, I was the first Attorney General candidate to call for an end to shackling, which right now, all young people who are tried as a crime in the District of Columbia are brought in shackles, regardless of if they're being charged with a violent crime or not. And the District of Columbia is the only jurisdiction that does that in the nation, where all young people are brought in shackles, and that's because we don't have local autonomy. So the U.S. Marshal Service are bringing in those young people. So I think it's absolutely important to end that practice and to move forward in ways that benefit our residents and not harm them.
Mr. Racine.
Yes, this goes back really to the first question that was asked about the structure of the Office of Attorney General, and it really relates to what is the force of an opinion issued by the Attorney General. Well, the Attorney General's legal opinions are in fact the law of the District of Columbia unless a court orders otherwise. And I think it's going to be incumbent upon the next Attorney General to be, frankly, prolific in the writing of opinions and transparent, because it's going to be very important for the Attorney Generals who are assigned to particular agencies to know what the law is and what they have to follow. It's going to be important for those agencies to know what they follow. So I will issue several and many opinions. With respect to the issues of diversity and minorities, let me just say first, there's a case pending now in the Federal District Court in D.C. before Judge Emmett Sullivan that implicates the most important rule related to the well-being of D.C. citizens, and that's the first source rule that requires new developments, new opportunities, folks to hire D.C. residents. That law is actually under attack, and I cannot wait to get in court, myself, may have to holler at Johnny a little bit, see if he's got some law that can help us, but to join that litigation and vindicate the rights that we have as folks to make sure that our citizens are hired when the new jobs arrive.
Thank you, Mr. Racine. Attorney Light.
Documents released under the Freedom of Information Act earlier this month revealed that the MPD uses a device called Stingray, which allows them, it's a portable device which allows them to listen in on any cell phone calls in a certain radius from where they're located. So far, no DC government official has commented on whether they believe warrants are required or whether the DC police have been routinely getting warrants before using this. What is your view on whether the police should be able to listen in on cell phone calls without warrants?
Good question. Mr. Racine.
I think it's an excellent question as well, and I saw that, the release of those documents, and I guess I was both horrified and at the end of the day not surprised because of the way the technology rapidly develops. I mean, here's the point: the Constitution protects us from intrusion without a warrant in matters where we have a reasonable expectation of privacy. It is absolutely my view that when I'm calling someone on my cell phone, I'm having a private conversation. And so I do think that what the police department is doing needs to be evaluated, needs to be tested, and I'm sure that you and your good lawyers will test that. And I'm going to look at it independently.
Ms. Williams.
I agree. I think that the police listening in on cell phone calls without warrants is unconstitutional. So there's absolutely an expectation of privacy, and when we're using our cell phones, we don't expect that the police are listening in. So I agree with that. And just in general, when we're talking about the police and cell phones, there's also been some situations where people have been videotaping people on cell phones, and the police have stopped them. Now I know we have Kathy Lanier, the police chief, has said that has reiterated to her officers, or she says she has, that we the public are allowed to videotape officers performing their duties in public. So I just want to say that I will be another voice calling for the police to absolutely uphold that and not to harass citizens who are videotaping the police in action.
I said this is going to be an ACLU love fest. There was a young Howard student who videotaped the police, MPD. They took his camera. ACLU sued, and it cost you all $1 million because of that police misconduct. So again, thank the ACLU for their role in that case. Ms. Luttrell has the final question from the panel.
Oh goodness, no pressure. Can you talk about the importance of the juvenile justice system, your experience with it, and any reforms you have for the juvenile justice system?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that's a really good question, and I support juvenile justice reform firsthand. I think it's absolutely paramount for moving forward as a city. I don't agree with what we're doing as a city as far as how we handle juvenile justice cases. So I think more people need to be diverted from the juvenile justice system, and we need to use programs such as counseling, be it substance abuse or mental health counseling, and also education and career programs to ensure that we're meeting the needs of some of our residents. So that in addition to that, one of the things I've noticed is that juvenile crime is actually going down in the city, but the amount of young people being charged as adults is going up. So I think that is absolutely something that we need to work on, keeping young people who commit the more serious crimes within the juvenile system and not the adult system. So then there's a chance of rehabilitation as well, and rather than saddling the young person with a criminal felony record, which will then follow them the rest of their lives.
Mr. Racine.
Yes, so here's what I've learned from representing kids and then also having the fortune of being around kids and mentoring kids through programs like Everybody Wins, the literacy program in DC primary schools, and the Abramson Foundation, a program that focuses on identifying talented 7th, 8th, 9th graders and staying with them through on high school graduation and providing scholarships for them. For representing kids charged with serious crimes in the District of Columbia, murder, rape, you name it, I've learned the following, two points really. One, there are a group of kids who are so traumatized and so affected that they need to be segregated for some time away from society because they are in fact dangerous.
In solitary?
I've learned, no, not in solitary confinement, absolutely not. I'm just saying that there are kids out here who are dangerous and who, frankly, we have an obligation to make sure that we're protecting the public interest. I've learned overwhelmingly that 95% of the kids out here in the system are salvageable. They're kids who simply need good, responsible, consistent adults in their lives. And it's incumbent, therefore, on the next Attorney General to advocate for saving the lives of these kids who can be everything that we are, so long as they're cared for, so long as they're held accountable and given opportunities to prosper beyond their narrow experience. That's what I've learned.
Thank you, Mr. Racine. We're just about on time. We have 2 microphones, one to the left, one to the right. If you will follow the standard that the panelists have set, keeping your questions to 30 seconds, we'll end up on time.